I'd like to hear from you if you are in a relationship, a long-term one, or a marriage, where your partner has very different views of money, the spending it, the saving it, the planning with it. I'd like to hear how you're attempting to navigate that. If that's something that you have successfully navigated, I'd be interested in hearing how you did it. We're at 866-893-5722, 866-893-5722. You can also email us at atcomments@kpcc.org. Please include your location and your first name. With us is behavioral financial advisor and co-founder of the Legacy Builders Group, Marcella Mollon-Williams. Marcella, thank you very much. It's good to have you with us. First of all, what is a behavioral financial advisor?
Thank you for having me, Larry. It's great to be on. Great question to start. A behavioral financial advisor is really what I do is a combination of traditional finance, neuroscience, and psychology. So I bring all those together to help individuals and couples manage their savings and investment behavior.
I think that, historically for so many people, the experiences that they went through in childhood can have a lifelong effect. I'm old enough that there were a lot of people around when I was growing up who'd gone through the Great Depression. And so there was kind of a feeling of scarcity and what seemed to me somewhat absurd in the lengths that they would go to protect their money or to avoid spending were ones that were really born out of a traumatic experience that they had gone through earlier in their lives. And I wonder if you can speak to some of the ways of addressing that so that people aren't necessarily held hostage to traumatic events of the past around money.
Oh, yes. Those are great insights, Larry, because we all, whether you grew up or are old enough to remember that era, we've all experienced some form of money trauma in our lives. And as my good friend and mentor, Tasha Chen always says, what's your money story? It's about what is the memory that you experienced. And what's really important and what I help navigate people through is the experience of discovering what did you experience about money growing up? Oftentimes we've had this element of like the no talk rule about money. And the no talk rule is really just a subconscious institution of rules in a household where everyone understands that you don't talk about money. And it shows up in different ways for people. For some people, Larry, they saw their parents arguing about money. So they now learn, let me not talk about money because if I do, it will cause anger and it will make me feel upset. And then other people may have just struggled maybe with a single parent who saw money struggles. And so they learned, just like the Depression era, that money is hard to come by and you have to work hard and deal with it. And there's always a struggle, like you said, scarcity, lack. Mm-hmm. So pinpointing this money memory that you have is so important, especially when entering a relationship, because we're all bringing in different baggage. And it must be addressed first.
So true.
Anything else.
We're talking with Marcella Mollon-Williams, a behavioral financial advisor and co-founder of Legacy Builders Group, which provides not just investment advice, but holistic coaching around finances. She's based in the D.C. area, and she's here to answer your questions and to provide her expertise to help you navigate if you find yourself in this circumstance. So here's your role as a listener to AirTalk, where you can be very helpful right now. If you are in the midst of dealing with a conflict in your long-term relationship or marriage around financial issues, around your values about money, and that those are very emotionally loaded and have led to conflict in your relationship, I'd like to hear about the specifics of that. briefly, a summary, of course, and then our guest can weigh in and provide some advice. We're at 866-893-5722, 866-893-5722, or you can email us at atcomments@kpcc.org. Please include your location and your first name. Marcella, I think the stereotype that we think of in the way of this conflict is, one person in the relationship who really doesn't have a sense, as the other would put it, of the value of money. That sort of money comes in and it impulsively goes out the door. That there really isn't a plan. There really isn't prioritization. It's sort of in the moment, not even decision making, but impulse. And then they're in a relationship with someone who looks at that, and that makes them feel vulnerable, seeing money fly out like that. And also, they may not know necessarily how to raise that issue without it creating a conflict, because it's not really a rational decision that the person who's impulsively spending is making in the first place. What advice do you have in that sort of stereotypical conflicted relationship?
Yes. Really seeking outside support, just like, marriage counseling, is really important, because couples need to understand how to communicate first and foremost with each other. That's where the challenge is. It's not the money issue. It's the communication issue about money, communicating within themselves, as we talked about before. If they haven't really been able to be honest with themselves about what's going on, then the struggle with communication will continue into that relationship. So being able to really get help, but really just as individuals, identifying where the similarities are as a couple is a great place to start. When I go through processes with new couples, we go through a process called a value assessment. And I work with them to identify their individual values and then come together to create their 5 core values as a unit. And using that as their standard, their platform, then they can have the money conversations around that, because so often we pay attention to the differences that we have. And that's where, our emotions always want to go to that focus of what's wrong with that person, what's wrong with the other person. Mm-hmm. But when we can shift our mindset to focus, okay, what is it that we agree upon? Then you can start working your way through the avenue of communication where it doesn't feel so intimidating.
How do you deal with the competing notions of freedom? And what I mean by that is, you might have someone in my previous example who, as money comes in, goes out almost as quickly, because it represents a kind of freedom. I've got the money. I see something that I would like, and I'm able to do it. The money's here, and it's an exercise of freedom and autonomy in the world. But the partner looks at that and feels like it's constraining of the partner's freedom, because it introduces financial vulnerability to them, that everything goes out just as it comes in. So how do you address that difference where what is for one person a release, a notion of freedom, for the other is the opposite?
It's funny, because while in our brains we think it's the opposite, it actually is the same. When I go through these processes of identifying values with these couples, the 2 things that I notice that pop up the most is the area wrapped around safety, security, peace. And then the other value that pops up a lot is freedom and autonomy. And when I look at this, I try to help them to understand that when it comes to financial planning and putting a budget in place, what we're actually creating is freedom within a framework. So we can feel so much more free when we know that there is a structure there that allows us to freely operate in the things that we want to do. Because when we just behave and move with our money and spend, and consciously we're thinking, oh, this is freedom. But subconsciously, there is still an underlying fear and concern that we're just not addressing and confronting. And when you can put them together and merge the safety security aspect with the feeling of freedom, that's when you'll find the freedom that both couples actually are longing for.
And so are you saying that you are able to put within that framework spontaneity that's still there for the person who is excited about, I saw that thing, I bought it immediately, that they can still have experiences like that, but within limits?
Most definitely. I remember just having a recent conversation with this exact same topic because spontaneity was a part of the freedom that she valued. And it was about creating a plan around that so that you have those savings, so you have that money aside. So, okay, let's plan for some time out. You can start actually exhibiting that behavior because you're kind of fooling your brain and thinking, oh, this is being spontaneous, although you've saved the money for it, but you still get to choose when you want to buy it. And your brain doesn't know the difference. So you're still going to feel all the exhilaration and the excitement of being able to make that spontaneous purchase, but you had the budget there for it.
Again, I'd love to hear from AirTalk listeners who have this experience of being in a marriage or long-term relationship with someone who has fundamentally different values and practices around money, whether it's over planning how to use money, whether it's setting priorities for spending, whether it's just how freely someone spends or not. What are the ways that you negotiate that if you have some significant differences with your partner or spouse? 866-893-KPECC, 866-893-5722. You can also email us at atcomments@kpecc.org. Please include your location and your first name. We're talking with Marcella Mollon-Williams, behavioral financial advisor of Legacy Builders Group based in the D.C. area, 866-893-5722. Marcella, do you see that often with couples that they have an effect on each other over time, that they start moderating their positions by being exposed to each other?
I do. I believe that is the case. And I believe that should be the case, actually. We come together. We're drawn to the similarities that we have, those similar values, but we're also attracted, I think, to the differences and the things that maybe we secretly desire in ourselves. There's certain traits. I know I did with my husband. He had a certain kind of confidence that I really loved and secretly desired. But we do that. And when it comes to money behavior, I believe that when we learn to appreciate both the similarities and the differences, then we can learn from them. So if you have a spouse that's a risk taker and then the other one is a bit more conservative, then in communicating with one another and being what I like to call co-CFOs of the household, then those differences will start to blend. And it will make for a better, more harmonious household when it comes to communicating about finances and achieving those goals and desires that are set up as a couple.
You mentioned being co-CFOs, and that can be a challenge in some relationships where that sort of financial power sharing is any quick advice on that?
Yes, it can be. I think within that, within these co-relationships, it's still important to identify the lanes, the tasks that each person has. But the communication, when I say that co-CFO, it really has to do with understanding that we are both responsible. We are in this together, and there's no one person at fault for this or the other, but we come together, we communicate as co-CFO, but we each have identifiable roles within this position.
We'll continue with behavioral financial advisor Marcella Mollon-Williams, and we have calls that we'll be taking from listeners. We're at 866-893-5722. Back in 1 minute. It's AirTalk. I'm Larry Mantle. We're talking about couples where there are significant differences in approaches to money, how to navigate that. With us, behavioral financial advisor Marcella Mollon-Williams. Let's take a call from Brooke in Pasadena. Good to have you with us on AirTalk.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Thanks for taking my call. Very nervous. I've never called in before.
That's right. You're among friends, Brooke.
No, this is an extremely sensitive subject for me. I personally was raised around a mentality of lack. You would think my dad was from the Great Depression himself. And I've kind of grown up calculating, putting a money value to every single thing. And it's caused so many problems in relationships where I can't even accept presents because if that money wasn't worth the present, I felt like it was actually affecting our livelihood, even if it wasn't, or even if we got a coffee that didn't taste like it should be $5, I would spit it out, return it, and, you know, kind of cause a fight and ruin a day out or an evening or a birthday or a Christmas. I'm currently now in a relationship where my partner comes from a mentality of abundance. And I've really been working on, you know, he always tells me, like, it's not about the money always. It's like, do you want it? Like, you can have it. And so it's been a huge shift for me. And I have a son from a previous relationship that I get worried that I'm going to pass this intergenerational trauma of this idea of lack to him. We're even to the point sometimes I'll say, like, we're out of money, and he tries to give me money from his piggy bank, and it breaks my partner's heart and mine.
What a kind boy.
And, you know. He's he went to Trader Joe's yesterday by his boss.
That's very thoughtful. Brooke, this is a great call. I'm so glad you raised this. And I find it interesting, you talking about your partner or husband, you know, saying like, well, it's not just about the money. There's an experience here as well that you can't always equate to the dollars, which is very interesting. And Brooke, Marcella, your thoughts on what she's describing here?
Yes, well, kudos for you, Brooke, for calling in and having this conversation, because I know it's not easy. And just the fact that you called and says a lot towards the mindset that you're working towards. So congratulations to you. And I love that you're working towards changing and developing a different conversation for you and your child. And with this, you're right. You know, I think it's great that, again, the opposites have attracted there. And that he talked to you about experiences. Where you're coming from is a very real place, and the lack mindset. So it is about making that shift. And one of the things I believe I heard through your conversation is about deservingness, about truly believing that you deserve to have something that you purchased, a gift, all of these things. And sometimes we really don't realize that that's one of the key areas, the roots of our money issues comes from the lack of deservingness. So really looking at that, how you feel, how money makes you feel, looking into that area of why don't I feel like I deserve this is a great place to start as you continue on this wonderful journey of yours.
Brooke, a terrific call. Thank you so much for sharing your experience that I know many others are going to be able to relate to as well. Brian in the city of Orange says, my wife made a very large purchase a year into our marriage, a new bedroom set, and we were on welfare at the time. She came at the situation from an emotional standpoint. I came at it strictly practically. We talked about it and we were able to work it out. That's Brian in the city of Orange. Rebecca emailed us, my husband and I come from very different backgrounds. He from a wealthy family, me very middle class. I think the hardest thing we've encountered is our difference in comfort level with debt. He absolutely avoids it, whereas I was taught having the credit to go into debt was something to be proud of. I've come around to his views on avoiding debt, but his, quote, cheapness always rubs my family the wrong way. Rebecca, thank you. Marcella, your thoughts on that email?
Yeah, that's a good one with Rebecca. Debt is one of those things that's interesting as far as where you come from in your background. You know, you hear there's good debt and there's bad debt, and understanding that. So educating themselves as a couple, could be very important. It could be helpful for them to start learning together and seeing the things that they can develop together in their financial literacy could assist them with these situations. And then again, dealing with what I call financial intelligence, and financial intelligence, which was actually brought forth by a man named Doug Lennox, is the ability to make smart, rational, value-based decisions with and about money in the face of competing and difficult to deal with emotions. And that's what we're talking about here. That's what we're talking about even with Rebecca. It's the emotions that her and her husband are experiencing. So learning to make more financially intelligent decisions and tapping into emotional intelligence will help to alleviate some of that stress within the relationship.
Leah in Granada Hills, you're on AirTalk.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to say that I've been married for 22 years, and my husband is more conservative in terms of spending. And so how I've had to compromise over the years is with long-term spending. I just defer to him for our retirement and things of that nature, because I know he's looking out for those things, and I honestly have not been good at looking out for those things. I tend to be an emotional spender. So if it's a smaller amount, like, oh, we're going to go to a concert, and, you know, I do that, then there's not really a conflict. But when I was younger and I would, like, say, take money out of my 401k, he, over time, convinced me that was not a good idea.
Good for him.
So
Don't want to do that, yeah. So, Leah, do you feel comfortable deferring to him on the longer-term issue of planning for later years? Do you feel good about that? And it sounds like you have confidence in him.
Yes, because his retirement account looks a lot different than mine. Right. So he is better at, I guess, what's called delayed gratification. So. Leah,
I appreciate it. So good to hear from you. Marcella, quick thought on her point about she and her husband.
Yeah, that's great. That they have that relationship. Again, there's the balance there. Their opposite behaviors really work itself out. I would just want to make sure with Leah that you are, even though you have the confidence in him and defer to him for those long-term goals, which is great, just make sure that you guys are continuing to communicate, whether it's monthly meetings, so that you don't completely, it's not completely off of your radar, but you're seeing what's happening while he is in charge. Again, that's his task, but you are both co-CFOs, so make sure that you always know what's going on.
Marcella, this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and experience with us. We appreciate it very much.
Oh, thank you for having me, Larry.
This behavioral financial advisor, co-founder of Legacy Builders Group based in the D.C. area, Marcella Mollon-Williams, joining us on AirTalk. Thank you for your terrific calls. I appreciate it so much, taking part in our conversation about couples who have very different views about money and how to reconcile those differences. NPR's Here and Now is next with the very latest on the massive earthquake and aftershocks in Turkey and Syria.